marriages and families. So if you don't hear anything else today, please hear this, that LifeReady seeks to unburden pastors and unleash lay people. Third statement is this: LifeReady follows that Genesis outline that you saw in the video. We're about doing 4 things, and 4 things only. We're about building healthy men and women as men and women. We're about building healthy marriages, healthy families, and then helping all of those learn in a basic way how to share their faith, either with a non-Christian, new Christian, or just a Christian who has no theological foundations. That's what we're about. Just those 4 things, nothing more. But I want you to hear this, nothing less. But what we want to do is do those things very, very well. And hopefully to have a church where that fundamental kind of foundation building that's important to every church, because the social foundation of every church is its marriages and families. That's why Genesis starts with the family, not the church. It's that social foundation. But if you can do those things very, very well in an ongoing way, you create a tremendous energy for your church that then begins to not only bless the church, but exude that influence into the community. So LifeReady is about those 4 things. Fourthly, LifeReady is about training requiring commitment. And on your notes, if you just do this as a reminder, would you just circle that one? LifeReady is about training requiring commitment. I don't know what comes to your mind when you hear the word training. We probably have different images, but the one thing we do know is that anybody who's being trained has a more serious approach. They understand that some commitment is required. If we were all deciding that we need to get healthy and we want going to join some athletic club, one of the big things today is when people go into an athletic club, they get a personal what? Trainer. And when that trainer steps in, it's not like you just going over to the gym and pushing a few barbells and maybe get on the Stairmaster for a couple of minutes. When the trainer walks into the room, everything gets a little more serious, doesn't it? Because he's there to make you different. He's there to elevate your game, challenge you in ways maybe you haven't been challenged, and teach you new skills that'll help you get to where you say you want to go. Now, let me tell you why that's important, because at the real core of LifeReady, it's about training, which means this: LifeReady is not for everybody in a church. It's not for everybody. That's very important that you hear that. But LifeReady is about those somebodies who want to raise their game, improve their skills, learn better how to manage their life. And so when they enter into that training experience, they're serious about what they want to get out of it. They want to see their lives changed. Now, isn't it interesting that in America, we're all about training? We train for our jobs. We train for our careers. We train in our recreations. We, like we said, we train to exercise even. This last year, my wife and I got hooked on The Biggest Loser. And I think we did because, it was just exciting to see these people stepping into this process where, with a lot of encouragement and training, their lives took a dramatic difference. I don't know if I think the biggest moment is when they get to the end and they step on those scales that last time and they flash back to where they started. I mean, it's startling. But let me tell you, that whole process of The Biggest Loser shouts a principle. It shouts every session. It shouts its principle. And here's the principle: there are no quick fixes in life. They're not. No matter what you do, there are no quick fixes. When it comes to life and having a life change, it requires 2 things in every area of life. It requires a commitment on your part, and it requires training. Right? I mean, for you guys who flew in, who is going to get on a plane where you're walking in and the pilot's sitting there going, I've never flown a plane before, but I'm looking forward to this. You wouldn't entrust your life to a doctor who had never been to medical school. You wouldn't take your car into an auto mechanic that had never worked on a car, or have your house built by a guy who, never did anything more than Legos. You're going to go with somebody that you believe has a skill, and behind that skill has been a lot of commitment and a lot of training so that they've got a different way of approaching that particular exercise that they are going to do for you. Now, here's why I say that. Because that's true of everything in the American landscape except the two most important relationships that we derive the most happiness from. Isn't that interesting? The two things that give us the most happiness in life, our marriages and our families. There is very little rigorous training at all. Maybe some premarital on the front end, which, by the way, just a little premarital counseling has been shown to have a dramatic effect on the success of the first 3 years of marriage. But after that, there's very little training that gives people life skills so that they can manage themselves rather than be dependent on the church to provide an occasional sermon series or seminar to give them a little boost to keep going. You know, I've got a good friendship for years with George Barna, and many of you know that Barna is a world-renowned researcher. But here's what he said about the American landscape in churches when it comes to marriage and family. He says, when it comes to marriage and family, most Christian couples simply follow their instincts and let the chips fall where they may. They get married, maybe after a little premarital counseling, and then for the first 5 years where there's the greatest failure rate, they guess at it. Or like my son last night who was holding his first son, this little baby. You know, there he is. He's been given this incredible gift that will also give back incredible experiences to him. But like most couples, if he's not careful, they think they're already ready for that event and that journey. And then they're going to guess at it. But you know what you do when you guess at it in life in these fundamental areas? Listen to what Proverbs 16:25 says. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the way therein is death. And you know what happens after a while when you assume healthy marriages and families in a church? After a while, your whole church becomes top-heavy with reactive crisis care because you didn't put in the time to do proactive preparation and training. LifeReady is about that preparation and training, retraining that requires a commitment. Let me just explain what I mean by that, because you're not going to give that training over a pulpit. And you're not going to give that training with an occasional seminar. It just doesn't work. There's not enough fleshing out what these things really mean in the everyday of life. You've got to go deeper, and people walking in have got to be more serious about why they're there. So I want to give you this principle that all these resources operate off of. And because it's really important that you hear that. They all operate in the beginning of ferreting out the uncommitted from the committed. So for instance, let's say we're going to do marriage oneness in your church. We're not going to announce marriage oneness and say, come one, come all, and then start the program. Not in any of these resources. When you announce something that's going to take place with a LifeReady resource because it's a training resource, you're going to get people who are going to hear that and think, well, I'd like to do that. And I call them the curious. Okay? They're just the curious. They want to know what it's about. And oftentimes, if you don't vet out the curious, they start and within 2 weeks they're done. Or they don't take it serious and they bring the whole group down. So what we do with all the LifeReady resources, we start with the curious, but then before you actually start, we have this thing. It's called an orientation meeting. I was just at one the other day here in Little Rock, where they had a number of couples who had heard about marriage oneness, and they came to this orientation meeting. And so they're there, and they were thinking, gosh, we're looking forward to doing this. And the leader of the orientation meeting said, hey, we are so excited about going on this marriage oneness journey with you. We think it can be life-changing. But let me tell you about some commitments you're going to need to make. If you're going to go on this journey with us, we need you to clear the decks for the next 8 weeks. That means eliminate some distractions. In fact, in this particular church, I thought the senior pastor had done a great idea. He said anybody who goes through the marriage oneness doesn't need to participate in their small group for those 8 weeks. So they're not overly busy with church stuff. They can just clear the decks and focus for 8 weeks on their marriage. So they